Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Good Friday morning. It is 5:06 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Let me correct that. Good Friday morning, everybody. I hope your Friday is off to a good start. You know my voice, Patrice Onwuka. I'm in for Larry today, and I've got Hans von Spakovsky. He's sitting in the passenger seat today. So good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Patrice. Thanks for having me in.
All right, you're going to be a great co-pilot. We've done this before. We're going to have some great fun today. Our guest coming up at 7:05, Maine State Representative Laurel Libby. She's going to be joining us to talk about just some things going on in her Maine's House District. 7:35, Mike Litteris from the National Park Service. He's got information on the peak bloom of the cherry blossoms. And at 8:05, Alana Goodman, Washington Free Beacon, is going to talk to us about the Epstein files. What did we see and what didn't we see? All right, so as I mentioned, you're listening to me, Patrice, and Hans. Hans, I always love being on with you because you are bright, you are brilliant. Anything I want to know about constitutional law, I feel like you have down packed. So we're going to jump right into it and really start here talking about the immigration, the President Trump's immigration reform efforts, and the fact that at every turn, the states, attorneys generals, lawmakers have sought to use the courts to block what he's trying to do in immigration in this country. And just by the way, if folks don't understand why I love talking to Hans about election law, about federal policy and so on, it's because you're the manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation, and you are a former member of the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. So, Hans, this week we saw that a U.S. appeals court rejected the Trump administration's emergency bid to curtail birthright citizenship. This is a big topic. And so catch us up to speed on exactly what is happening here and what the implications are for addressing birthright citizenship in this country.
Well, look, I can't say I'm surprised. Many legal theorists and others have the wrong idea about this. They think that the 14th Amendment recognizes birthright citizenship, and they're just wrong about it. I mean, that's the general view in our law schools these days across the country. But don't forget, I think they're just as wrong about this as they were about the fact that, remember, when Trump was in his first term, you'll recall that he issued what everybody called the travel order, right? He closed the border to all aliens coming in from a certain set of countries, mostly countries that were state sponsors of terrorism. All these different entities sued him. All these courts kept saying, the president can't do that. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, look, he can do this. Not only is it within his constitutional authority as commander-in-chief and therefore the guardian of national security, but there was a specific state federal statute that granted him the power. So in the end, he won. And I think if the Supreme Court actually looks at the 14th Amendment the way it was originally intended, discussed by the sponsors, they're going to say, no, you not only have to be born in the U.S., but you have to be subject to its jurisdiction. That's the second half of the key phrase, which all these courts and everyone else, they just ignore that part and just say, if you're born in the U.S., obviously you're a citizen. That second part, that doesn't mean anything.
So it's so interesting because you're talking about the difference between the law versus how society, how our country has interpreted and acted. Yes. And so, I mean, it's fascinating because you tell people, well, this is actually the law. They don't want to hear that because the norm has been, well, if you're born in this country, you're automatically conveyed with citizenship, birthright citizenship. And so I draw a parallel to, the so-called loss of women's rights when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it's been positioned as a constitutional right to an abortion. We know that's not the case, too. So let's say that birthright citizenship is not particularly upheld here by the Supreme Court. What happens? going forward?
Well, what it will mean going forward is, just like in almost every other country in the world, in order to show that you're a U.S. citizen, you would have to show that at least one of your parents was a U.S. citizen when you were born. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be both parents, but the standard rule all over the world is that you are a citizen of the country of your parents. And that is what the 14th Amendment says here, and that's what the rule should be.
And just to clarify, so that if your parent is a naturalized citizen, that still that qualifies the same as if they have. Well,
yes,
if they were
obviously.
born in this country. Okay.
Right, of
yeah.
course.
Well,
of course.
I bring it up because I, for example, I'm a naturalized citizen, and actually I came from another country. Both of my parents are also naturalized. But let's not forget that the reason why we're going after birthright citizenship is to stop the gaming of the system,
Right.
where people intentionally move to America or just come to America within that final trimester to deliver a baby so that the child can have citizenship, and they, by extension, maybe out of the good graces of the American people, get to stay as well.
No, that's right. And it was just a couple of years ago that the Justice Department filed these criminal indictments. It was actually the first time they had done this against these birth tourism agencies in California. And they indicted,
surprise.
I think, close to 24 individuals who specialized and got paid a lot of money to bring Chinese women, Chinese citizens to the U.S., lying to immigration authorities, the only purpose of which was so that they could have their child in the U.S., have them be considered a U.S. citizen, and then use that as a way of getting into the country permanently.
So speaking of illegal immigrants and tracking the people who are here illegally, I mean, Hans, I'm sure you have seen different numbers. I've seen 10 million. I've seen 20 million. I actually don't know if we know, but it looks like here we've got this story coming from the Associated Press that immigration officials want everyone living in the United States illegally to register. Immigration officials say that this is going to be coming down the pike, this kind of national illegal immigrant census, so to speak. It will be mandatory for everyone 14 years and older who does not have legal status. This is according to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. I think we'll probably get some more details about this, but it looks like federal immigration law has long required that
That's
people
right.
living in the United States register. Again, Hans, we're talking about what the law has always said versus what the norms have been. What are you expecting to happen if all illegal immigrants are required to, as by law, required to register and say, hey, I'm here, I'm living in this country?
Yeah, I already saw critics saying, "Oh, this is Donald Trump once again doing things he's not allowed to do." No, this has been the law for a very long time, many decades. Congress put this in, and of course, it hasn't been enforced. And I think the idea here is, while DHS has records on the millions of illegal aliens who are actually stopped at the border, processed,
Yes.
and then let go by the Biden administration, the estimate is that during the 4 years of Biden, there were at least probably 2 to 2.5 million what they call gotaways. These are folks who paid the cartels extra money to get them past the Border Patrol, so they were never stopped and processed. Patrice, you got to wonder, given how easy the Biden folks made it, why were these people paying extra money to not get a record, not get processed?
Yeah.
And
It makes you wonder, Hans.
Yeah. You have no doubt that there were many criminals and others amongst those groups. Anyway,
Exactly.
if those individuals are now caught and they didn't register as required by federal law, that gives DHS an even easier path to deport them.
All right, we've got more on immigration, including some local angles and local news related to the immigration enforcement right now. But it is 5:16:17.
WMAL, making sense of the news.
All right, so Tom, we're talking about Tom Homan, and actually, Hans, you mentioned listening to Tom Homan yesterday. We've got this interesting story because we're seeing a lot of local angles to the local lawmakers pushing back on the immigration enforcement angles, and we've got an interesting here in Boston. Well, not here in Boston, but up in Boston. Tom Homan responds to the mayor Michelle Wu, who's calling his promise to bring hell to Boston just bluster. She's kind of downplaying it. Let's see here. Okay, we don't have a clip yet, but in short, he's saying, "Listen, I'm coming to Boston. I'm going to quote bring hell with me." That's not me saying the HE double hockey sticks, Hans, but that's Tom Homan, and he was talking to a conservative conference this past weekend. He's saying that the Boston police are derelict in their duty on immigration enforcement, and now the Boston police are being backed up by the mayor of Boston, who thinks, she says, this is the difference between bluster and legal authority. We've been clear for many weeks.
Well, we seem to have temporarily lost Patrice. We have the city of Boston basically trying to obstruct federal immigration enforcement, and they seem to think that's good for the people of the city, and that also they can do that. And the problem, of course, is when you allow MS-13 gang members to remain in the city because you think that's better than somehow making sure they're deported, that makes no sense whatsoever. The other big thing that people should understand is that mayors, governors, and others, they're not immune from criminal prosecution if they obstruct immigration enforcement. That's particularly true in Massachusetts, where a state court judge there during the first Trump administration was actually criminally indicted when she allowed an illegal alien, helped sneak him out of her courtroom rather than handing him over to an ICE agent. And she was criminally indicted. Right. Patrice, I think we have you back.
Yes. Okay. So you lost. All right. Yes. You're here. Go for it. Go for it.
So the point is that, they don't have to help enforce federal immigration laws, but they cannot get in the way of federal immigration agents. And, for example, if any official there, whether they are in the police department or in local government, if they, for example, harbor, hide, transport an illegal alien, that's a criminal violation of federal law, and they could be indicted for it.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece there, because a lot of these local policymakers, they don't see this as a protecting illegal immigrants, as protecting public safety. This is purely politics. This is purely partisan. They want to be the resistance against the Trump administration, and frankly, maybe the resistance against the dollars that they get, federal tax dollars, to house and to continue to boost the headcounts in their cities with illegal immigrants. But the fact that they want to be the resistance and the hurdles to the federal law enforcement here, I think speaks more about their lack of commitment to public safety than anything else.
No, it does, and I have no doubt that if they talk to residents in parts of Boston, I'm real familiar with the city. I went to college.
I grew up there.
I went to college there.
Yes.
I think if they talk to residents who have been plagued by the crime of criminal gangs populated by illegal aliens, particularly folks from Mexican cartels and elsewhere, MS-13, those residents could say, please, come get these criminals out of our neighborhoods.
Well, we talked a moment ago about the potentially a national registry of all illegal immigrants, where you would have to say, raise your hand, I'm here illegally. And this is by law already on the books. And so we have an interesting local update here in Virginia. If you remember, folks, a judge blocked Virginia from dropping alleged illegal or non-citizens from their voter rolls. This was right before the election last fall. major news because this was an effort by Governor Youngkin and AG Jason Miyares to really ensure that the people who are going to be eligible to vote in our federal and local elections were actually eligible. They were not non-citizens. And so at that time, a federal judge had granted the Justice Department's request to block Virginia from systematically removing all of these alleged non-citizens. I think it was in the thousands of people. 1,600 people were removed. Well, we have an update as of Wednesday. We have an update here. Let's see here.
Yeah, it was the Justice Department, the new Justice Department, the new Common Sense Justice Department.
Please take it.
They dismissed the case, which is what it should never have been filed in the first place. It was just, to me, totally bizarre, just bizarre that the Justice Department is going to court and actually got a liberal federal judge, which is a big problem in the courts right now, to agree that Virginia can't take aliens who are not only are they not entitled to vote, it's a felony under federal law for them to vote. No, they couldn't take them off the rolls. It made no sense, and thank goodness we now have people running the Justice Department to understand that, and so they threw the case out.
Very good. Well, we're going to have more. We're going to be talking more about immigration as the morning goes on, no doubt. But right now it is 5:24 WMAL.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Good morning. It is 5:36 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. You're listening to Patrice Onwuka. I'm in for Larry today, and I've got alongside co-piloting with me Hans von Spakovsky from Heritage Foundation. And we're going to get you through the rest of this half hour and, frankly, the rest of your drive time, your morning time. At 7:05, we've got the Maine State Representative Laurel Libby. She's going to talk about the battle over protecting women's sports in her state. At 7:35, Mike Litteris from the National Park Service. We know Mike. He's going to give us the update on the peak bloom, peak cherry blossom bloom that's coming up fast. And then at 8:05, Alana Goodman from the Washington Free Beacon is going to tell us what we did not get out of the release of the Epstein files. All right. Well, Hans. We started off talking about immigration. That was a pretty big voter motivator in the 2024 elections. And then women's sports, women's rights, protecting women's spaces from the diabolical males parading themselves as women. That was one of those sleeper issues that I think came up. And we saw last month the beginning of this month, President Trump really took the mantle, that issue of protecting women's sports, and turned it into an executive order that would bar biological males from competing in women's sports. But Hans, at the time, and our listeners know, myself, Larry, Julie, Mercedes, we really hammered home this is not the end of the story. An executive order from President Trump is great, but it is not the end of the story because more needs to be done. And let me just get your reaction just to the need for even an executive order to protect women's sports.
Well, the point of that order is that, look, the president's power in this area is limited. What he's doing is, as you know, under various federal civil rights laws, if you're going to get federal money as a school, a university, and so forth, you've got to comply with those federal civil rights laws. And what the president is saying is that we are enforcing those federal civil rights laws on this issue to require that boys, for example, not be allowed into girls' sports. But that's dependent on the schools receiving federal funding. The school systems are all run by state governments. And so if they resist this, they're going to get into a huge fight over it. And that's what's going on now. You know what amazes me about this, Patrice, is this is all happening in blue states, Democratic governors and others resisting this. And it's like, did they not see what happened in the election? This was an issue that crossed political lines. You know, that photo of the president surrounded by young girls in their athletic team uniforms, I'm telling you, that's an iconic photo that will be long remembered out of all the things happening in the Trump administration.
It was so memorable.
It was.
And you really positioned this well, because we have an interesting update here. So I actually just caught it. Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares, he joined a number of other attorneys generals, as he pointed out, not surprisingly, from red states, Republican states. They went in and joined the Attorney General Pam Bondi to discuss how to keep biological men out of women's sports, and to enforce Title IX. You rightly pointed to the fact that this is a state's issue now. This is a local issue, because as we've seen, a lot of these state lawmakers, everyone from the governor of Maine to a lot of these schools, are totally ignoring what President Trump is saying, his executive order, and they want to allow boys to continue to compete against biological girls, and so. You've got this great shot here, Attorney General Pam Bondi with Jason Miyares, Virginia Attorney General, really talking about what needs to happen next. And it can't come at a better time, because I think there's momentum, Hans. There's momentum behind this issue. And people have to recognize, yes, the NCAA said, okay, biological men will not compete in women's sports. Okay, that's good. But we're talking about your local school. We're talking about your local volleyball team, your local soccer team, girls soccer team, your local girls school, basketball team, where the changes are not coming. Talk to us about where you think that these attorney generals can really focus their energy.
Well, a lot of people may say, well, why does the Attorney General of Virginia care about this? Well, because these athletic leagues play teams from other states. And so that's where their interest in their jurisdiction comes about, because if there are teams coming in from other states, blue states, that basically have boys who are masquerading as girls on those teams, that is unfair to girls' teams in Virginia. It is potentially dangerous in games with physical contact like lacrosse. Yes. And so it is something that most definitely the Virginia Attorney General needs to get involved in, and hopefully they will do that with the help of the Justice Department.
And just such a great example of the hand-to-hand combat, so to speak, between the Republican states and the Democratic states, or the red and the blue states, came to a head. We saw recently, as I mentioned, Maine's Department of Education is saying that they're not going to enforce this order. They're not going to comply, and so Maine's House of Representatives. Maine representative from the Maine House of Representatives, Laurel Libby. She's going to be joining us a little bit later in the show, but she was censured. She was actually censured on Tuesday night because she pointed out in a social media post that a transgender high school male winning a girls' competition should not be the case. She's not even saying, she's anti-trans or anything. She's just saying it should not be the case that a biological male should be competing and winning against other girls in different competitions. And she gets censured. I mean, Hans, help us make it make sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't make sense. Listen, this is just one of the many reasons why, if you look at even the latest reports from the census, people are leaving these blue states. They're moving out. It's because of ridiculous and frankly oppressive actions by state governments like this, overtaxing, overregulating. It's like we are dividing again as a country, as we did before the U.S. Civil War, except in this case, everything is kind of the opposite. The blue states are the ones that are becoming oppressive, and people are leaving those states and heading south and southwest because that's where they're going to have freedom to be Americans and pursue all of their opportunities and not be injured by these kinds of terrible actions by state governments.
Well, we're going to have more on this coming up. Stay with us, though. It's O'Connor and Company at 544.
Later this morning on the Chris Plante Show, the Democrats love CEO killer Luigi Mangione, raising more than $600,000, and the women love him. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Ooh, this music must signal we are going to news across the pond. Yesterday, President Trump hosted the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the White House. We've got this great shot of him holding up a letter that he received. We'll get to what's in the letter because it's going to pretend to something that we love, Hans, which is, the British royals and covering that. But yesterday, the UK Prime Minister really made some interesting news when talking about their discussions on what can be done when it comes to the war in Ukraine. And frankly, the UK and the European Union's role in the deal that will be reached or, is close to being reached and what happens going forward. Let me quote here an interview that Starmer did, the UK Prime Minister did with Brett Baer, where he said, quote, "I've indicated that the United Kingdom will play a leading part, whether that's troops on the ground. We've also talked about possible air and maritime work that we can do, talking to our European partners." How important, Hans, do you think that the UK taking a leading role in the end and moving forward after the Ukrainian conflict is over?
Well, look, all along, Trump has been saying, and he's right, that the Europeans, look, the Ukrainian-Russian war, yeah, we're concerned about it, but this is in their neighborhood. This is next door to them. And they are the ones that should have been taking the leading role in trying to resolve this conflict. And so it's clear that the British Prime Minister is finally latching on and saying, oh, yeah, we are going to be involved in this. Of course, in order to do that, he's going to have to increase his defense budget because the United Kingdom has been just as bad as the Europeans in relying on us to protect them and have never spent the amount of money they need to on their defense. By the way, he also in that interview, I got to mention this, was saying he was going back against J.D. Vance and saying, "Oh no, we believe free speech, First Amendment rights are very precious and we protect them," which is an absolute lie. That is just a lie with what has been happening in the United Kingdom.
Oh, it's ridiculous. But I'm glad J.D. Vance called out all of these European leaders and called out a lot of their tech policy. I do a little bit of research on this, and it is ridiculous what they're doing to companies and to individuals in these European countries to control their speech. And then the fact that we have a lot of Democratic left-leaning policymakers who want to import those bad policies here on our shores in the United States. To your point, though, about the UK increasing what they're spending, their defense spending, they've now committed to increasing it by 2.5%. Unfortunately, that is still less than half of what President Trump is asking them for. So we'll see. I mean, this continues on. But let's get to the important news here, the one that I can't wait to share with folks. King Charles has invited President Donald Trump back to the United States for an unprecedented second visit to the UK. How excited are you for that, Hans?
Well, that is going to be a really, really interesting meeting, isn't it? Trump's real first meeting with the new, relatively new King of England. Gosh, are we going to be in the room to hear what they're talking about when that happens?
Oh, we've got to.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be very interesting, particularly because, look, King Charles has been pretty liberal on a lot of issues, taking views that we would consider to be very left-wing in this country, and it's going to be interesting to see how that discussion goes with the president.
Well, the way this was announced and rolled out, I love this image where the President Trump, as we mentioned, had been meeting with the UK Prime Minister, and the UK Prime Minister handed him a note, a letter directly from King Charles making that request, formally inviting him to come and visit the UK again. And President Trump, he graciously accepted on the spot. He said, let's see here, he's a beautiful man, a wonderful man. We appreciate, I've gotten to know him well, actually, from his first and second term now. So that's what President Trump said, and he's looking forward to going to visit. I know I am looking forward to us covering it because the pomp and circumstance that surrounds the crown is something that, here as Americans, I think we get a little bit jealous of. The crown, we do have some pomp and circumstance for the President of the United States, but it is nothing compared to the guards standing outside of the palace, compared to the parades that happen. So, the only thing that could make this trip sweeter is maybe a new grandbaby announced. You know what I mean? Coming into the royal family.
No, Patrice, what would make it sweeter is if WMAL covers it live from London.
In the press pool.
Yeah, and you have a guest host because Larry can't make it.
Your lips to WMAL's had ears. All right, it is 5:53.